Indeed, the Americans are committed to removing this scourge of international terrorism and the way in which it is slaughtering thousands upon thousands of innocent people simply on the whim of some fanatical group. So I think that it is a matter for Russia to share what it knows, but I think there is a very clear commitment now to do so, and I believe that it is the foundation of a new cooperation and indeed a new coalition against these terrible attacks that might be visited on any capital city on any day.
Lord Robertson, NATO Secretary-General. Well, speculation continues to mount about what action the US might take and against whom. Frightened residents in the Afghan capital, Kabul, are bracing themselves for a possible attack. There are reports that residents have begun digging trenches in anticipation of US retaliation and that other fortifications were being made. Local residents are also appealing to the United States to think carefully about any action.
The United States attack Afghanistan. It will have tragic come out for the people, which we already have experienced for the past 23 years.
As an Afghan youth, I condemn this possible attack on our country. It would be a hideous act. Americans should not attack as our people are very poor and weak.
We are Muslims and we have no fear about any attack. We rely on God. But without any evidence, an attack would be bad and an illogical act.
Now to some other news. Britain's Conservative Party has named Ian Duncan Smith as its new leader. 61% of Conservative Party members voted for Mr Duncan Smith. Just 39% voted for his rival, the former Finance Minister Kenneth Clarke. Mr Duncan Smith had been favourite to win the leadership race, and his Eurosceptic views are popular with grassroots Conservative voters. The former leader, William Hague, had resigned after a humiliating general election defeat in June of this year. The result of the ballot had been delayed for a day as a mark of respect for the victims of the terrorist attacks in the United States. And finally, still with what happened in the United States, in London, a special changing of the guard ceremony took place at Buckingham Palace to honour those who died in those attacks. The American national anthem was played, followed by a 2-minute silence. People across Britain have also been paying their respects. Here's our correspondent Jenny Bond.
At a time when the Western world is finding it hard to put its shock and grief into words, the Queen ordered a unique gesture at Buckingham Palace. Several thousand people, many of them American, gathered outside the gates as, for the first time in its history, the changing of the guard ceremony was modified and the American national anthem was played, a poignant tribute to those who died in New York and Washington. The Duke of York represented the Queen, who's returning from Balmoral for a special service at St Paul's tomorrow. At his side, the American ambassador, William Farish. After the anthem, a 2-minute silence. It was a moment of solidarity at a time when many are feeling vulnerable.
Well, it's just hard to know that 15,000 families or more than that are just destroyed for no reason. I mean, it's just real hard. It's real hard.
Outside the American Embassy in Grosvenor Square, Roosevelt's statue has become the focal point for floral tributes and messages of sympathy. In scenes reminiscent of the days after the death of the Princess of Wales, Americans and Britons alike have been marking the tragedy in quiet contemplation. Among the visitors today, Camilla Parker Bowles, accompanied by the American ambassador. For his countrymen stranded abroad, the memorial gives some sense of purpose.
Well, I think all of us had friends and family who worked in the Trade Center, and you know, since we can't be in New York and we can't be there to help, this is what we can do.
Obviously, we can't go home until everything clears up out at Heathrow, but it's a terrible thing. A lot of, decent people have died, and unfortunately, it's just the beginning.
The shock has permeated the Muslim community here as well. At this home in Liverpool, family and friends joined in special prayers.
We think that something terrible has happened, something which has never happened before, that in one stroke, thousands of people have been killed, and all of them innocent people.
At American bases in Suffolk, flags are flying at half-mast. And as the West considers its response, the Prime Minister too is working beneath a flag lowered in memory of the thousands who lost their lives so suddenly. Jenny Bond, BBC News.
Now, let's return to New York, where it's just after midday. Live pictures from there. You can see the extraordinary plume of smoke and rubble and dust, which is still rising. Mayor Rudy Giuliani did say that despite concerns, the level of pollution around the area is quite bad in the middle, but not just beyond the epicenter. He tried to reassure the New Yorkers about that a few minutes ago. Meanwhile, President Bush has been speaking in the Oval Office. He was speaking to Rudy Giuliani and also the governor of New York State, George Pataki. He described Tuesday's attacks as the first war of the 21st century. America, he said, will lead the world to victory. And he's going to visit New York City tomorrow. That's it for the moment. Next up, World Business Report. Stay tuned for continuing coverage.
Thanks very much, Nick. Yes, this is World Business Report with me, Michelle Hussein. Well, as the economic and financial implications of Tuesday's attack become more clear, America's central bank, the Federal Reserve, is making billions of dollars available to European banks. The joint action with the European Central Bank is aimed at meeting the cash needs of the banking system. Earlier, the G7 nations pledged that their central banks would work together to make sure that emergency withdrawals did not stabilize the banks. Well, the world's financial markets are in a third day of uncertainty, with New York's equity markets still closed. On Thursday, bond trading resumed, and the Nasdaq's chairman, Hardwick Simmons, says that it's possible the New York Stock Exchange will reopen on Friday.
The wants of the infrastructure, particularly power, access, food, were so great that together they kind of overwhelmed the individual capabilities, and I think made it smart that what we do is talk about a no later than Monday opening, with every hope that we can open the markets on Friday.
Hardwick Simmons there of the Nasdaq. Now, insurers across the world have begun publishing initial estimates for claims arising from the attacks. The German company Munich Re expects the highest amount, $900 million, followed by Swiss Reinsurance. Europe's biggest insurer, Allianz of Germany, is predicting $630 million. Meanwhile, America's biggest, AIG, is unable to give any estimate. Well, London is home to the biggest insurance market in the world, Lloyd's, and earlier underwriters gathered for a minute's silence. Cameras remained outside as a mark of respect. Inside the main hall of Lloyd's, the lutein bell used to mark tragedies was rung. Many of those present had lost friends and colleagues.
There was a very poignant moment in there today, and, you know, it's the loss of lives that everyone's thinking about. I mean, really, the money side of it doesn't come into it. It's irrelevant, quite frankly, at the moment.
There's a lot of insurance people have been involved in it, so I think it's a bit close to a lot of people.
One ex-colleague who works for Aon in the World Trade Center, who was my first boss nearly 30 years ago. So I've known for a very long time. And he's unaccounted for at the moment, so that's a shock I heard this morning.
Some views there from outside Lloyd's in London. Well, Julian Brays, the editor of Lloyd's List, he's with me now. Julian, we had those initial claims that some of the insurance companies are coming out with, but presumably it's going to be a very long time before we're sure of the size of the claims that will result from this.
Indeed, this is going to be one of the most complex legal insurance cases that the world's ever seen. It's going to be one of the biggest claims ever, and you can imagine in a litigious country like the United States, it's going to take a very long time to settle these claims.
It's the size of the claims, and then presumably lots of different types of claims. Will it be the airlines or the airports or the authorities in New York that'll face the biggest of them all?
Indeed, it's going to be a huge raft of claims. Not only have you got the different types of claims, say for the property, the aviation hulls, the business interruption, as we were just seeing, the loss of key executives. There's the issue of responsibility. Was this responsibility of the airlines for not having secure enough planes, or the airports, or even the civil authorities?
Looking at how the global insurance industry actually works, we saw those claims there that were coming out from the European insurers. Would the risk be spread across the world in circumstances like these?
Indeed, although this is looking like being one of the biggest casualties ever, into up to $20 billion perhaps, the risk is spread amongst a range of very large and very powerful financial institutions. All of them, as far as we know so far, believe that they are manageable within their own portfolios. So no one large company is at risk, although the total is very large.
And what about the process of establishing the claims? Obviously, it's going to be a long battle, but will there actually be a legal battle that ensues, or will the companies be looking to settle?
Regrettably, almost certainly there will be a very long legal battle over this. The insurance business is very good nowadays at trying to settle personal claims quickly to ensure personal settlements, that people are not out of pocket, so they can cover personal costs. But when it comes to the larger claims and the claims for loss of business, that's going to be a very complicated business indeed.
I want to ask you for a moment about the airlines, 2 airlines involved in this. What kind of coverage would they have? Is it relevant if George W. Bush talks about it as an act of war rather than just a terrorist attack? Does that make a difference in terms of liability? Well,
all insurance policies have exclusion clauses. Traditional insurance policies written in the UK, for instance, excluded terrorism. In the US, they often included terrorism for obvious reasons, that it's a very rare event for it to happen. When it comes to the airlines, they're faced with various claims on, first of all, various insurance policies. First of all, for the aircraft themselves, and also the liability for the passengers. We've seen several hundred passengers lost in this. They will all potentially have claims against the airlines, which those claims alone could run into over $1 billion per claim.
Stunning amounts. Julian Bray of Lloyd's List, thanks very much for joining us. Now, time to just take a look at some of the other stories making the business news. The European Central Bank has kept interest rates on hold at 4.25%. There had been speculation that central banks could coordinate a round of interest rate cuts to try and boost the global economy. But the Governor of the Bank of England, Sir Edward George, has rejected that idea. In the United States itself, the latest figures have emerged on consumer confidence. The University of Michigan survey conducted a day before the attacks showed the confidence of U.S. consumers at its lowest level for 8 years. The figures come after data released almost a week ago showed the U.S. jobless rate at a 4-year high. I'll hand you back now to Nick.
Thanks very much indeed, Michelle. Well, let's now go live to an FBI briefing in Washington, which is just beginning.
The enemy that has struck has attacked not just our people, but all freedom-loving people everywhere in the world. The United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy. We will rally the world. We will be patient, we will be focused, and we will be steadfast in our determination. Make no mistake about it, we will win. As a first step in that direction, the President...
Well, as you can see, the feed from Washington, D.C. of that crucial briefing has halted for this minute, at least technically. But let me give you an update on what has been happening in the last hour or two. The first war of the 21st century, that's how President Bush was describing about 90 minutes ago the new global fight to find and eliminate those who ordered and sanctioned Tuesday's devastation. He said that America will lead the world to victory, and world leaders fear the same acts could take place against their countries. Just over 5,000 people are now officially reported missing in New York and Washington, 4,700 of them in New York. But it is just being reported by media sources in New York City that some people, including a 24-year-old woman, have been pulled alive from the rubble. That's more than 2 days after the World Trade Center was hit. Well, the biggest manhunt in United States history is underway to find the accomplices of the hijackers. Global police forces are also following leads. The FBI says it has identified most of up to 50 people involved in the 4 aircraft hijackings. Well, the President will visit New York tomorrow. From the White House, he spoke by phone to the Mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, and the New York State Governor, George Pataki. He was expressing support and appreciation for the massive rescue effort.